The Switch needs to die. Whoa, what an interesting and provocative hook that will make you watch to the very end of the video and possibly even leave it a like, huh? Yeah, probably not. Look, the importance of the Switch cannot be understated. It quite literally blended the lines between a home and portable console and perfected the hybrid gaming system, but that was 5, almost 6 years ago now. In the time from the Switch's release to now, companies have caught up, they've reimagined, they've reinvented. These new devices caught up to the Switch and in most cases, especially with the Steam Deck, have improved upon the Switch. In that very same time, Nintendo have not innovated. The very best that's happened to Nintendo is a Switch Lite console and an OLED model, which gave larger onboard memory, a better screen, and an improved kickstand. All things that are nice, but aren't really that necessary. But let's get back to that first sentence of the video. You might be saying, well, Sean, the Switch has only been out for 6 years. It's not that old. I don't think it needs to die. And I'd respond with, shut up, don't question me. Just listen to what I have to say. The Switch, even at its launch, was behind in terms of its hardware by comparison to its competition. The chipset alone was already 2 years old when the Switch was first released in 2017. Now, Nintendo never really got involved in the console war. They were kind of off in the corner doing their own thing. They never really got involved, and typically in most generations of consoles, their hardware was lacking compared to those of PlayStations and Xboxes. And that's kind of become a standard for them. The consoles have been incredibly fun from Nintendo, but they always just seem to be a little bit behind. Now, this is actually fine in my opinion until developers need to start making games for vastly different consoles with an array of different hardware specs and capabilities. Previously, most consoles are somewhat within a ballpark of each other. However, with the release of the PS5 and the Xbox Series X and S, the Nintendo Switch is now miles behind. And you hear this in every single review, whether it's exclusive to Switch, whether it's cross-platform, whether it's a port, or whether it's early access. It struggles more than anything on the Switch compared to any other console. Let's look to some examples, starting with the early access. Why am I praying for? What the fuck? So early access games are known for being full of bugs across all platforms. But let's take a look to the most recent early access game released on the Switch and other platforms, Disney Dreamlight Valley. And the Switch version is just completely plagued with bugs that make the game unplayable and just a downright broken mess. Yes, this game has experienced bugs on all platforms, but none more so than the Switch. Now take a look at this example. This is exactly what I'm talking about. On the very day of me recording this, there was a loading issue across the board when it came to Disney Dreamlight Valley. The solution to fixing this issue on the Switch was to simply play this game on another platform. The issues were resolved on PC, Xbox, and PlayStation, but Switch players were left in the dark. Now you might be saying, look, one early access game might not be a good sample size to justify why the Switch needs to die. And I'd say, hey, shut up, you might be true, but let's look to some other examples. Let's look at some ports and let's look at some games that are across multiple platforms. So let's go ahead and look at Cult of the Lamb to begin. Released in a relatively bug-free fashion across all accounts apart from the Switch. The usual suspects are here, including frame drops, low frame rates, input lag, and stuttering. And at one stage, there was even a game-breaking bug that prevented players and followers from even moving after performing a ritual, which would entirely prevent players from progressing any further in the game. Again, just supporting that the Switch just has more problems than anything else. Let's look to some ports. Skyrim, ported over to the Switch, runs horribly with unstable frame rate issues and reports outlining that the game frequently dips below 30 frames a second and has a low field of view that has caused some players to report that they feel motion sick when playing. Minecraft for the Switch targets 60 frames a second, but will often lock you out to 30 frames a second in times of high load, like rain or dense foliage. It also only runs at 720p. No Man's Sky, dropping as low as 20 frames a second, content is missing, poor performance being reported, and is even touted as being the second-rate way to enjoy this game. Okay, so games that are multi-platform or the ones that have been ported over might not be the Switch's strong suit. Most people now know that if a game you want comes out across multiple platforms or is ported, you either accept a higher risk of performance issues as a trade-off for the portability benefits, or you just get it on a different platform for a more stable experience. Not all ports are treated the same, however, some just come down to pure laziness by the devs. Kingdom Hearts, I'm looking at you with that bullshit cloud system, but more on that later. Now at this point you might be saying, hey Pixel, I don't play those games on my Switch. If it's coming out on other consoles or platforms, I opt for the alternatives and only use my Switch for the Nintendo exclusive games. Surely the rate of issues steadily declines for games that are made for one console and one console only, right? Well, you'd be half true in that. Since the devs only need to make the game for one console, it's a much more specific and tailored and calculated approach. But you then run into some very immediate and consistent issues that are becoming ever more present on the Switch. Let's see if you can guess it.
Other than that, Sparks of Hope performs well enough, though some of the bright and colorful worlds do cause the poor Switch to chug a bit in places.
And hardware-wise, the Switch holds up pretty well with such a lot to render, but in larger battles and other processor-heavy situations, you will notice the occasional drop in performance.
But overall, Xenoblade Chronicles 3 is a real technical triumph on Nintendo's aging console, although it all comes at the cost of somewhat lacking performance in docked or handheld mode. For example, when running around the monastery or even moving the cursor around large maps, the frame rate tends to take a noticeable dip.
Because if there's one thing that really holds Bayonetta 3 back, it's the Nintendo Switch. This is the very first new release game I've ever reviewed where I thought to myself as I was playing it, I really hope this gets a remaster.
Did you catch it? Do you see what I mean? In most titles released for the Switch, their reviews in some way mention dropped frames or performance issues. In the odd chance that a game works well or without a hitch, developers are praised as being the vehicles for a technical triumph or accused of performing some kind of magical act by getting a game to run well on this aging console. Imagine that, being praised for getting a game to run as intended on a console. Is this seriously the standard that the Switch is setting for us? Now this isn't an issue isolated to one developer or one game franchise. First party, third party, multi-platform, ports, early access, it doesn't matter. There is a common theme that the Switch is constantly, and now more than ever, having performance issues.
Well, performance issues, it's not uncommon. 1 out of 5.
It is a consistent issue no matter what variables are changed. Now, game developers all across consoles and across all different platforms are constantly balancing between graphical fidelity and game performance, but the Switch constantly feels like it struggles with this regard in just trying to reach a happy medium. The fact that such comments and concerns are present in almost every single review for this console is telling that the console is just struggling and games are being held back. Games, especially as of late, suffer immensely in terms of their performance, or visually, the games could pass for much older console releases. To put it plainly, they just don't feel like new games. Many developers have also proclaimed that the Switch is actually quite simple to develop for, so it's not a lack of skill or optimization that's the issue here, it's a lack of decent hardware. All involved in making games for the Switch are limited, restricted, and bound to its hardware. Hardware that at its release was already outdated. You can only work within the confines and limitations set within the console, and those limitations are plentiful on the Switch. Franchises also seemingly regress on the Switch in terms of their visual prowess. Compare the variety and diversity of landscapes in Monster Hunter World, a game released for the PC. One of the most immediate things I noticed when I first started playing was just how much emphasis was put on this game's verticality and the levels themselves playing a huge role in how you actually take down a monster. Look at the detail. Compare that to Monster Hunter Rise, a game within the same franchise released on the Switch, and you can see how bare and barren the levels and landscapes look by comparison. This is not to say that Rise is the worst game. In fact, many actually prefer the handheld convenience of Rise over World, but the impact of the lacking hardware is undeniable, and the limitations placed on the newer games is quite frankly unacceptable. Developers are in a constant struggle, a balancing act juggling what features to keep in and what to take out and where to put certain resources into. More often than not, developers will often keep a game's performance strong at the sacrifice of visual fidelity and the world design. This means that your levels and world designs are far less interesting, but the trade-off is that the game is still playable. Now at this point you might be saying, Sean, what are you talking about? There have been some incredible looking games on the Switch. And I would say, yeah, you're right in some cases. There have been some absolutely stunning games on the Switch, and a lot of those games run quite well in both docked and handheld mode. Mario Odyssey, a personal favorite of mine, set an incredibly high standard as to what the games on the Switch could look like. But this is a standard that we're all forced to accept. It looks good for the Switch, not good on its own, good for the Switch. I'm not saying that all games on the Switch are bad, but I can't deny the trend that I'm seeing, especially as of late, that the newer Switch games suffer in their overall presentation and all their performance. Not all, but many. It's very telling of a console that's holding back the potential of these games due to its limiting hardware. And I mean, all throughout this console's history, there have been times where it just feels incomplete. In most recent times, in September of 2021, they only just released the ability to use Bluetooth headphones in their 13.00 update. This feature was clearly baked into the console, but it took years for them to release it to the players. The Switch's cloud gaming system is completely abysmal and relies entirely on someone's internet connection. So if you have a bad internet connection, you're out of luck. But why would anyone want or even need a cloud gaming system over just using the console itself? Well, as so eloquently put by Games Hub, it's an alternative way of running games where the processing power comes from remote servers. The cloud allows gamers to stream games from these servers, which takes the bulk load of processing needed to run these games away from any one device. I wonder why the Switch would need this. It definitely could be because the console is struggling and anything over basic details makes the console sweat. Now, since we basically don't have local cloud servers here in Australia, or they're extremely rare, any games that come out as cloud versions are basically cut off for us, like the Kingdom Hearts port, but from what I've heard about that, that's probably for the best. I love my Switch, I truly do, but as each year passes, I just see it now more as a liability than anything else. I have no confidence in the Switch's abilities anymore. I wait for reviews to come out for games I'm interested in before buying, just as a preventative approach to buying a product that might not actually run as advertised. Can you imagine a world where game developers for Nintendo aren't restricted in the hardware for the consoles they're making the game for? I'm not a fan of consoles being re-released or a new version coming out every 5 to 6 years. I do feel that that is a little bit quick. However, every time I pick up my Switch, I just get the feeling that that change is long overdue. I just hope that the next console released by Nintendo, whatever that may be and whenever that might come out, is in some way comparable to the now current generation of consoles. But let me know in the comments down below, do you feel like the Switch is lacking? Do you feel that it's holding developers back? Let me know all your thoughts in the comments down below. If you like these videos, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. I also want to thank the people on screen right now who have gone above and beyond and supported me through Ko-fi. Now, if you want your name in the video and to also have access to these videos early, go ahead, click on the Ko-fi link and become a supporter. But that's all for today, guys. Take care out there, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next one.